Jackson Rivera stared at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows of his downtown office, watching the city bustle 30 floors below. At 28, he had built a tech empire that most people could only dream of, his company Rivera. Innovations had revolutionized mobile app development, making him one of the youngest millionaires in the city. Yet, for all his success, there was one thing that continued to elude his control: his father's expectations. "Jackson, you cannot keep avoiding this conversation forever." Marcus Rivera's voice echoed through the spacious office as he sat across from his son's mahogany desk. Older man, distinguished with silver temples and wearing a perfectly pressed suit, had that familiar look of disappointment that Jackson knew so well. "You are 28 years old. It is time you found a good woman and started thinking about family." Jackson turned away from the window, his dark eyes meeting his father's stern gaze. "Dad, I've told you 100 times. I'm focused on the business right now. Romance isn't a priority." "Should be," Marcus insisted, his accent still carrying traces of his Spanish heritage despite decades in America.
"Your mother,
God rest. Her soul would want to see you happy, settled, not buried in spreadsheets and board meetings." The mention of his mother sent a familiar pang through Jackson's chest. Maria Rivera had been the heart of their family, the one who could make both men laugh even during their most heated arguments. She had passed away 3 years ago, leaving behind a void that neither father nor son quite knew how to fill. "I know, Dad. I know." Jackson ran a hand through his thick black hair, a gesture he'd inherited from his father. "But I can't just manufacture feelings for someone." Marcus leaned forward, his expression softening slightly. "I'm not asking you to manufacture anything. I'm asking you to try. There's a charity gala next month for the Children's Hospital. Bring someone. Show me you're at least open to the possibility." Jackson wanted to argue, to point out that most women who showed interest in him were more attracted to his bank account than his personality. But the pain in his father's eyes stopped him. Since losing his wife, Marcus had thrown himself into traditional values, perhaps as a way to hold on to something stable in a world that had become unpredictable. "Fine," Jackson said finally. "I'll bring someone to the gala." Marcus's face lit. "Up with hope? Really? You have someone in mind?" Jackson didn't, but he nodded anyway. "You'll meet her soon enough." As his father left the office with a spring in his step that Jackson hadn't seen in months, the weight of his promise settled on his shoulders. He had 4 weeks to find a girlfriend, or at least someone willing to pretend to be one. 3 weeks. Later, Jackson still hadn't found a solution to his problem. He'd considered asking his assistant, but Sarah was happily married with 2 kids. His business partner David had laughingly suggested hiring an actress, but something about that felt too dishonest. Even for a fake relationship, it was a rainy Thursday morning when fate decided to intervene in the form of a small coffee shop collision. Jackson had ducked into Beans and Dreams, cozy cafe near his office, seeking shelter from the unexpected downpour. The place was crowded with other refugees from the rain, creating a warm, buzzing atmosphere that was quite different from his usual sterile office environment. He was checking his phone for messages when someone backed into him, causing a cascade of hot coffee to splash across his expensive Italian shirt. "Oh my God, I am so sorry." The voice was melodic, tinged with genuine distress. Jackson looked up to see a young woman with long, dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing paint-stained jeans and an oversized sweater. Her brown eyes were wide with horror as she took in the damage to his shirt. "It's fine," Jackson said automatically, though the coffee was already seeping through the fabric to his skin. "Really, don't worry about it." "No, it's not fine at all. This shirt probably costs more than I make in a month." Oh. She was frantically digging through a worn canvas bag, pulling out tissues and napkins. "I'm Amelia, by the way. Amelia Chen. I'm usually not this clumsy, I swear." Despite the situation, Jackson found himself smiling. There was something refreshing about her genuine concern, so different from the calculated interactions he was used to, Jackson Rivera. And honestly, it's just a shirt. Amelia looked up at him, and for a moment their eyes met. Jackson felt something stir in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the spilled coffee. She was beautiful, but not in the polished way of the women who usually pursued him. There was something real about her, something authentic. "Let me buy you a new shirt," Amelia insisted, "or at least pay for the dry cleaning." Jackson was about to refuse when an idea struck him. It was crazy, impulsive, and completely unlike him, but something about this woman made him want to take a chance. "Actually," he said slowly, "maybe there's another way you could help me." Amelia raised an eyebrow, wariness creeping into her expression. "What kind of help?" "I need a date for a charity gala." "Nothing romantic, just someone to accompany me for one evening. In exchange, I'll forget about the shirt and maybe help you with whatever you need help with." For a moment, Amelia just stared at him. Then she laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Are you seriously asking me to be your fake date to make up for spilling coffee on you?" "I know it sounds crazy," Jackson admitted. "I'm kind of desperate here." Amelia studied his face, looking for signs that he was joking. When she found none, her expression grew more serious. "Why would someone like you need a fake date? Surely you have women lining up around the block." Jackson felt heat rise to his cheeks. "It's complicated. Family expectations, you know." Something in his tone must have resonated with her because Amelia's expression softened. "Trust me, I understand family expectations better than most." She was quiet for a moment, seeming to wrestle with some internal debate. Finally, she spoke again. "What exactly would this involve?" "One evening. A charity gala. You'd need a formal dress, which I'd provide, of course. You'd have dinner. Maybe dance a little, and you'd meet my father. That's it." Amelia bit her lower lip, a gesture Jackson found unexpectedly endearing. "And in return, name your price." The words hung between them, and Jackson immediately regretted how transactional they sounded. But Amelia didn't look offended. Instead, she looked thoughtful, almost calculating. "My mom is in the hospital," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "She needs surgery, but our insurance won't cover all of it. I'm an art teacher, and I've been working 3 jobs just to make ends meet, but it's not enough." Jackson felt his heart clench. Here was someone facing real problems, real struggles. While he was worried about disappointing his father over a fake girlfriend, "How much do you need?" $50,000. The number came out like a confession, as if she was ashamed to even say it. For Jackson, $50,000 was what he spent on a weekend trip. For Amelia, it was clearly everything. "Done," he said without hesitation. Amelia's eyes widened. "Just like that? You don't even know me. How do you know I won't just take the money and disappear?" Jackson looked into her eyes, seeing the desperation there, but also something else. Integrity. Honor. "Because I don't think you're that kind of person. You're either very trusting or very naive," Amelia said. But there was a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Maybe both," Jackson admitted. "So do we have a deal?" Amelia extended her hand, and Jackson took it, feeling a jolt of electricity at the contact. "We have a deal, Jackson Rivera. But I have conditions." "Name them." "First, this is purely business. No funny stuff, no trying to turn this into something real. Second, after the gala, we go our separate ways. And third, if anyone asks, we met through mutual friends, not because I dumped coffee on you." Jackson found himself grinning. "Agreed. Though I think the coffee incident has more charm as an origin story." "Maybe," Amelia said, returning his smile. "But let's save that for the sequel." As they exchanged contact information, Jackson couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to embark on something that would change his life in ways he couldn't imagine. Looking at Amelia, with her paint-stained clothes and genuine smile, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, his father's push toward romance might not be such a bad thing after all. Little did he know that in 3 weeks, he would be questioning everything. He thought he knew about love, about himself, and about what it meant to find someone worth fighting for. The boutique was unlike anything Amelia had ever experienced. Soft classical music played in the background, while impeccably dressed salespeople moved between racks of designer gowns that cost more than most people's cars. Jackson sat in a plush armchair, looking perfectly at home in this world of luxury, while Amelia felt like an imposter. "I really don't need anything this expensive," Amelia whispered to him as a saleswoman approached with an armful of evening gowns. I could rent something for a fraction of the cost. Jackson looked up from his phone, his dark eyes meeting hers. Amelia, we've been over this. If you're going to be my date, you need to look the part. My father will notice every detail. Psst. Saleswoman, an elegant woman named Victoria, began holding up dresses against Amelia's frame. With your coloring, I think the midnight blue would be stunning, or perhaps the emerald green. As Amelia was whisked away to the dressing room, she caught her reflection in one of the many mirrors scattered throughout the boutique. 3 weeks ago, she had been grading art projects in her tiny apartment, worried about paying rent. She was trying on gowns that cost more than she made in 6 months. Preparing to play the girlfriend of a millionaire, the midnight blue dress fit like it had been made for her. The silk fabric flowed over her curves, and the color brought out the depth of her brown eyes. When she stepped out of the dressing room, Jackson's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. His phone slipped from his hands, clattering to the floor. "No," Victoria said with a satisfied smile. "I think we have our winner." Jackson stood slowly, his eyes never leaving Amelia's face. "You look," he started, then stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "You look beautiful." Amelia felt warmth spread through her chest at his words, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. This was business, nothing more. "It's just the dress," she said, trying to keep her voice light. "No," Jackson said quietly. "It's not just the dress." The intensity in his voice made Amelia's heart skip a beat, but before she could respond, Victoria was bustling around them, talking about shoes and accessories. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them. Something that made the air feel charged with possibility. 2 days later, Amelia found herself standing in the grand foyer of the Riverside Country Club, her arm linked through Jackson's as they prepared to enter the charity gala. The blue dress rustled softly as she moved, and the diamond necklace Jackson had insisted on borrowing from a jeweler felt foreign against her skin.
"I'll remember,"
Jackson murmured in her ear, his breath sending shivers down her spine. "We've been dating for 3 months? We met through mutual friends at a gallery opening. You love my sense of humor, and I love your passion for art." "Got it," Amelia whispered back, trying to ignore how good he smelled, like cedar and rain. "And you love how I challenge you intellectually." "That part's actually true," Jackson said, and when Amelia looked at him in surprise, he gave her a wink that made her stomach flutter. The ballroom was magnificent, with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over hundreds of elegantly dressed guests. Amelia had never seen so much wealth concentrated in one place, and she felt overwhelmed by the sheer opulence of it all. "Jackson," a booming voice called out, and they turned to see Marcus Rivera approaching, his face beaming with joy. He was shorter than his son, but carried himself with the same confident bearing. Behind him walked a distinguished woman with silver hair and kind eyes. "Dad," Jackson said, and Amelia could feel the tension in his arm where it linked with hers. "I'd like you to meet Amelia Chen. Amelia, this is my father, Marcus, and my aunt Elena. So you're the young woman who has captured my son's heart," Marcus said, taking Amelia's hand and kissing it in an old-fashioned gesture that somehow didn't seem outdated coming from him. "Jackson has told me so much about you." Amelia glanced at Jackson, wondering what exactly he had said. "All good things, I hope." "Says you're an artist," Elena chimed in, her eyes twinkling with interest. "How wonderful. I've always believed that artists see the world in ways the rest of us cannot." "I'm just a teacher, really," Amelia said modestly. "I teach art to middle school students. Just a teacher?" Marcus looked scandalized. "Young lady, teachers shape the future."
"There is no just about it."
As the evening progressed, Amelia found herself genuinely enjoying Marcus and Elena's company. They were warm, funny, and clearly adored Jackson, even as they teased him mercilessly about his workaholic tendencies. "You know," Elena said, as they sat down for dinner, "Jackson hasn't brought anyone to meet us since college. We were starting to think he was married to his computer." "Aunt Elena," Jackson warned, but he was smiling. "What? It's true. You spend more time with spreadsheets than people." She turned to Amelia with a conspiratorial whisper. "How did you manage to drag him away from the office long enough to court you properly?" Amelia felt her cheeks warm. I think I just wore him down with my persistence, she said, improvising. I kept showing up at his office with terrible coffee and art supplies until he agreed to go to dinner with me. Jackson raised an eyebrow at this fictional version of their meeting but played along. She's being modest. The truth is, she spilled, paint all over my favorite shirt, and I was so charmed by her apology that I asked her out on the spot. How romantic. Elena sighed. Marcus, do you remember when you covered me in flour during that cooking class we took? That was an accident, Marcus protested. But his eyes were soft with memory. As the older couple began recounting their own love story, Amelia found herself watching Jackson, the way he listened to his family, the gentle smile that played it, his lips when his aunt teased his father, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before. This wasn't the serious businessman she had met in the coffee shop. This was someone who loved and was loved in return. Would you like to dance? Jackson asked suddenly, extending his hand to her. Amelia hesitated. Dancing meant being close to him, meant pretending an intimacy that was becoming harder to fake. But Marcus and Elena were watching expectantly. So she placed her hand in his. On the dance floor, Jackson pulled her close, one hand on her waist, the other holding her fingers gently. The orchestra was playing something slow and romantic, and all around them, couples swayed together in the soft light. You're doing great, Jackson murmured, as they moved together. My family adores you. They're wonderful, Amelia said, and she meant it. You're lucky to have them, I know. His voice was soft, thoughtful. I sometimes forget that when I get caught up in work. They danced in comfortable silence for a moment, and Amelia found herself relaxing into the rhythm, into the warmth of Jackson's arms around her. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her chest, could smell the subtle cologne he wore. Amelia, Jackson said suddenly, his voice different, more vulnerable than she had ever heard it. Yes, thank you for doing this. I know it. Wasn't easy, jumping into my world like this. Amelia looked up at him, seeing something in his eyes that made her breath catch. It's not as hard as I thought it would be, she admitted. Their eyes locked. And for a moment, the rest of the ballroom seemed to fade away. There was only Jackson, only the way he was looking at her like she was something precious, something worth treasuring. Amelia felt herself leaning closer, felt Jackson's arms tighten around her. Well, well. Jackson Rivera, as I live and breathe. The moment shattered as a woman's voice cut through their bubble of intimacy. They turned to see a tall blonde woman in a red dress that probably cost more than Amelia's car, approaching with a predatory smile. Victoria, Jackson said, and Amelia could feel him tense. I didn't know you were in town. Victoria Blackwell was the kind of woman who commanded attention simply by existing. She was beautiful in a polished, intimidating way, with perfect makeup and jewelry that caught the light with every movement. Her eyes swept over Amelia with barely concealed disdain. Flew in just for this event, Victoria said, completely ignoring Amelia's presence. Daddy's donating a new wing to the children's hospital, you know. I thought we might catch up over drinks later. I'm here with someone, Jackson said firmly. Victoria, this is my girlfriend, Amelia Chen. Amelia, Victoria Blackwell. Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade as she finally acknowledged Amelia. How? Quaint. And what do you do, Amelia? I'm a teacher, Amelia said, lifting her chin despite feeling completely outclassed. A teacher, Victoria repeated, as if the word left. A bad taste in her mouth. How noble. And where did you two meet? At. Let me guess. Some charity event for underprivileged children. Amelia felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but before she could respond, Jackson stepped forward, his voice cold as winter. We met. When she was buying art supplies for her students, she was so passionate about giving these kids a chance to express themselves that I couldn't help but be impressed. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. And Amelia felt a surge of gratitude toward him for making her sound impressive rather than pitiful. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. How sweet. Well, Jackson, when you tire of playing teacher, you know where to find me. She drifted away, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume in her wake. "I'm sorry about that," Jackson said immediately. "Victoria is complicated ex-girlfriend?" Amelia asked, though she already knew the answer. "Something like that?" He ran in the same circles for a while. "She's not a bad person, just—" He struggled. "For words used to getting what she wants. Something like that." As they returned to their table, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that she had just gotten a glimpse into Jackson's real world. The one where women like Victoria belonged and women like her were just temporary visitors. The thought left her, feeling hollow, despite the magical evening they had shared. But as Jackson pulled out her chair and smiled at her, his eyes warm and genuine, Amelia pushed her doubts aside. This was just pretend, after all. In a few hours, she would go back to her real life, and Jackson would go back to his. There was no point in wishing for something that could never be real. Yet, as the evening continued, as Jackson's hand found hers under the table and his laughter made her heart skip beats, Amelia found herself wishing anyway. And that, she realized, was the most dangerous thing of all. 3 months had passed since the charity gala, and what was supposed to be a one-night arrangement had somehow evolved into something neither Jackson nor Amelia had anticipated. Their fake relationship had taken on a life of its own. With family dinners at Marcus's house, quiet evenings at Jackson's penthouse, and stolen moments that felt increasingly real, Amelia stood in Jackson's modern kitchen, preparing breakfast. While he worked on his laptop at the Granite Island, the morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden light across the space. It was a scene of domestic bliss that would have seemed impossible 4 months ago. "My mom's surgery went perfectly," Amelia said, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. "The doctors say she'll make a full recovery." Jackson looked up from his screen, his face lighting up with genuine joy. "That's wonderful news. When can she come home?" "Next week." Amelia paused, spatula in hand. "Jackson, I can't thank you enough for what you've done for my family. The money, the private room, making sure she had the best doctors." "You don't need to thank me," Jackson said, closing his laptop and giving her his full attention. "Your mom is important to you, which makes her important to me." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning that neither quite knew how to address. Their arrangement had been clear from the beginning, business only, no real feelings involved. But somewhere along the way, the lines had blurred beyond recognition. Amelia's phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Sophie. "Girl, you need to tell him how you feel before it's too late. Anyone can see you're crazy about each other." She quickly put the phone face down, but not before Jackson caught a glimpse of her expression. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Just Sophie being Sophie," Amelia said, forcing a smile. "Knows everything about my love life." "And what does she think she knows?" Jackson's voice was casual, but there was something in his eyes that made Amelia's heart race. Before she could answer, the doorbell rang, saving her from having to navigate that particular minefield. Jackson frowned. His doorman usually announced visitors. "I'll get it," he said, but when he opened the door, his expression darkened. Victoria Blackwell stood in the hallway, perfectly dressed as always, holding a bottle of champagne and wearing a triumphant smile. "Surprise, darling," she said, sweeping past him into the apartment. "I brought champagne to celebrate." "Celebrate?" "What?" Jackson asked, his voice tight with controlled annoyance. Victoria's eyes found Amelia in the kitchen. Her smile became predatory. "Oh, you haven't told her yet? How delicious." "Told me what?" Amelia asked, a cold feeling settling in. Her stomach, Victoria set the champagne on the counter with deliberate care. "About your little arrangement, of course. Jackson hired you to play his girlfriend, didn't he? Quite clever, really. Much cheaper than actually dating someone long-term." The color drained from Amelia's face. "What are you talking about, Victoria?" "Get out," Jackson said, his voice dangerous. But Victoria was just getting started. "Oh, come now, Jackson. Surely she deserves to know the truth. That you paid her $50,000 to pretend to care about you because you couldn't be bothered to find a real girlfriend." Amelia felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "Jackson, it's not like that," Jackson said desperately, moving toward her. Yes, that's how it started. But Amelia, what we have now is fake. Amelia finished, her voice barely above a whisper. It's all fake. No, Jackson said firmly. What started as fake became real, at least it did for me. Victoria laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the apartment. How romantic. The poor teacher actually thought the millionaire fell for her. How quaint. Get out, Jackson said again. But Victoria held up a hand. I'm not finished. You see, Amelia, I know Jackson better than anyone. We've been on and off for years. This little game he's playing with you is just a phase. He'll get bored, just like he always does, and come back to where he belongs. With someone more suitable, you mean? Amelia asked, finding her voice at last. Exactly. Someone who understands his world, his needs. Someone who doesn't need to be paid to put up with him. The words hit Amelia like physical blows. Every insecurity she had buried over the past 3 months came flooding back. Of course. This wasn't real. How could she have been so stupid to think that someone like Jackson could actually fall for someone like her? Amelia, please, Jackson said, reaching for her. Don't listen to her. She's just jealous. Because what? Amelia pulled away from his touch. Because she's right. Because I was naive enough to think that any of this was real. It is real, Jackson insisted. What I feel for you is real. But it started as a lie, Amelia said, tears streaming down her face. Everything. We've shared every moment I thought was genuine. It all started because you paid me to pretend to love you. And you pretended very well, Victoria added with cruel satisfaction. I almost believed it myself. Jackson spun around to face Victoria, his face a mask of fury. I want you out of my apartment, now, and if you ever come near Amelia again, I'll make sure you regret it. Something in his tone must have convinced Victoria that he meant business, because she gathered her purse and headed for the door. But she couldn't resist one parting shot. When you're ready for something real, Jackson, you know where to find me. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Jackson and Amelia alone in the suddenly tuck-quiet apartment. Amelia? Jackson said softly, Please, let me explain. What's to explain? Amelia asked, wiping tears from her cheeks. You needed a fake girlfriend. I needed money. We both got what we wanted. That's not all we got, Jackson said desperately. Somewhere along the way I fell in love with you. Really, truly in love. Amelia's heart clenched at his words, but she couldn't let herself believe them. How can I trust anything you say? How do I know this isn't just another performance? Jackson ran his hands through his hair, looking more lost than she had ever seen him. Because I'm terrified, he said finally. I'm terrified of losing you, of going back to the empty life I had before you came into it. I'm terrified that you'll walk out that door and I'll never see you again. Maybe that would be for the best, Amelia said quietly. We're from different worlds, Jackson. This was always going to end eventually. It doesn't have to end, Jackson said, moving closer. We can make this real. We can start over. Do this right. How? Amelia asked. How do we start over when everything between us is built on a lie? Jackson was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. But I know I love you. I love your laugh, the way you get excited about your students' artwork, the way you always put everyone else's needs before your own. I love that you challenge me, that you make me want to be better than I am. Jackson Amelia's voice broke. I love that you see beauty in things other people overlook. I love watching you paint, the way you lose yourself in it completely. I love that you cried during commercials and that you always ordered the same thing. At restaurants, because you're afraid to try something new and not like it, each word was like a dagger to Amelia's heart because she could hear the truth in them. But the foundation of their relationship was still built on deception, and she didn't know how to move past that. I need to go, she said finally. Time to think. Amelia, please, no, Jackson. Can't do this right now. I need space. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, Jackson's desperate voice following her. This isn't over, he called. I won't give up on us. But as the elevator doors closed between them, Amelia wondered if maybe it should be over. Maybe some things were too broken to fix. The next 2 weeks were the longest of Jackson's life. Threw himself into work, but nothing could distract him from the Amelia-shaped hole in his chest. He called, but she didn't answer. He sent flowers, but they were returned. He even showed up at her school, but the principal told him that Amelia had requested he not be allowed on the premises. Marcus noticed his son's distress immediately. "You look terrible," he said bluntly, when Jackson showed up for their weekly dinner looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Thanks, Dad. Really helpful. Where's Amelia? I haven't seen her in weeks." Jackson stared at his untouched plate. "We broke up." "Why?" "'Cause I'm an idiot who thought I could control everything, including love." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" So Jackson did. He told his father everything. The fake relationship, the contract, how he had fallen in love with Amelia despite himself, and how Victoria's revelation had destroyed everything. When he finished, Marcus sat back in his chair, studying his son's face. "You know what your mother would say if she were here? That I'm an idiot? That love isn't about control? It's about faith. Faith that the other person will choose you, not because they have to, but because they want to." "I don't think Amelia will ever want to choose me again," Jackson said miserably. "Then you'll have to give her a reason to," Marcus replied. "It better be a good one." It took Jackson another week to figure out what that reason might be. When the idea finally came to him, it was so simple and so perfect that he couldn't believe it had taken him so long. He found Amelia at the small art gallery where she had been spending her evenings working on pieces for a show she was putting together with some of her students. She was standing in front of a large canvas, a paintbrush in her hand, completely absorbed in her work. "It's beautiful," Jackson said softly. Amelia spun around, paintbrush still raised. "What are you doing here?" "I came to grovel," Jackson said honestly, "and to give you something." He held out an envelope thick with official-looking papers. Amelia took it warily, her eyes never leaving his face. "What is this?" "The deed to this gallery," Jackson said. "It's yours. No strings attached, no conditions. Whether you forgive me or not, whether you ever want to see me again or not, it's yours." Amelia's eyes widened as she scanned the documents. "Jackson, I can't accept this. It's too much. It's not enough," Jackson said. "Nothing could ever be enough to make up for hurting you, but I wanted to give you something that was just yours, something that had nothing to do with contracts or arrangements. This is your dream, Amelia. You should have it." Tears began to flow down Amelia's cheeks. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I love you," Jackson said simply. "Not the version of you that played my girlfriend. Not the woman who looked beautiful in designer dresses at fancy parties. I love the real you, the woman who gets paint under her fingernails, who cries when her students succeed, who gives everything she has to the people she cares about. Jackson." "I know I messed up," Jackson continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I know that what we started was built on a lie. But what grew between us, what I feel for you now, that's the most real thing I've ever experienced." Amelia set the paintbrush down with trembling hands. "How do I know you mean it? How do I know this isn't just another elaborate gesture to get what you want?" Jackson took a deep breath, knowing that everything depended on his next words. "'Cause I'm not asking for anything in return. If you take this gallery and never speak to me again, I'll understand. If you decide you can't trust me, I'll respect that. But I needed you to know that what I feel for you isn't about contracts or arrangements or what you can do for me. It's about who you are and how you've changed my life in ways I never thought possible." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small, the paint-stained tissue she had used to clean his shirt that first day in the coffee shop. "I kept this," he said, holding it out to her. "From the moment we met, I told myself it was because it was funny, but really it was because even then, something about you felt important." Amelia stared at the tissue, then back at Jackson's face. "You really kept that?" "I kept it because that was the moment my life started to change. Before you, I was going through the motions. Work, family obligations, empty relationships that meant nothing. You made me want to actually live." "Jackson," Amelia whispered, fresh tears spilling over. "I know you have every right not to trust me," Jackson said. "I know I hurt you, and I know I let you down. But if you'll give me a chance not to, be your fake boyfriend, not as part of some arrangement, but just as a man who loves you more than he ever thought possible, I promise. I'll spend every day proving that what we have is real. For a long moment, they stood there in the quiet gallery, surrounded by Amelia's art, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Finally, Amelia spoke.
Right.
When Victoria told me about the contract, it wasn't just the lie that hurt, she said quietly. It was realizing that I had fallen in love with you despite trying so hard not to. I had broken my own rules, let myself believe in something I thought was too good to be true. It is true, Jackson said urgently. What I feel for you is true. I know, Amelia said, and Jackson's heart leaped. I can see it in your eyes, hear it in your voice. But Jackson, I need to know that if we do this, if we try to make this real, it won't be about me fitting into your world. I'm not Victoria, never going to be comfortable at fancy parties or care about designer clothes. I don't want you to be anyone other than who you are, Jackson said. Your world, with its paint-stained jeans and terrible coffee and late nights grading papers, that's the world I want to be part of? You've shown me that there's more to life than boardrooms and profit margins. Amelia studied his face, searching for any trace of insincerity. What she found instead was vulnerability, hope, and a love so deep it took her breath away. The gallery, she said finally, is really mine? No matter what happens between us. It's really yours, Jackson confirmed. I had my lawyers draw up the papers. It's in your name, free and clear. Amelia looked around the space she had dreamed of owning someday, then back at the man who had made that dream possible. You know, there's something I never told you about that first day in the coffee shop. What's that? I had been having the worst day. I had just found out about my mom's diagnosis. I was behind on rent, and I was seriously considering giving up on my dreams. I was actually crying in the bathroom before I came out and bumped into you. Jackson's expression softened. I had no idea. When you offered me that deal, it felt like a miracle. It's not just because of the money, but because, for the first time in months, someone was treating me like I was worth something. Even if it was just pretend. It was never pretend for me, Jackson said. Maybe the arrangement was, but my feelings, those were real from the very beginning. Amelia smiled through her tears. You want to know when I knew I was in trouble? When you stood up to Victoria at the gala, it's not because you had to, but because you wanted to protect me. That's when I realized I was falling for you. So where does that leave us? Jackson asked, hardly daring to hope. Amelia took a step closer to him, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. It leaves us with a choice. We can let the way this started define us, or we can decide what happens next. And what do you want to happen next? Instead of answering with words, Amelia reached up and cupped his face in her paint-stained hands. I want to start over, not as a fake couple, not as part of some arrangement, but as two people who found something real in the most unexpected. Plays Jackson's arms came around her waist, pulling her close. I love you, Amelia Chen. The real you, the forever you. I love you too, Jackson Rivera, even when you're being an arrogant millionaire who thinks he can solve everything with money. Did it work? Jackson asked with a grin. This time, Amelia said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him. But don't make a habit of it. Their lips met in a kiss that was nothing like the careful performed kisses they had shared during their fake relationship. This was real, full of promise and hope, and the kind of love that could weather any storm. When they finally broke apart, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. So what do we do now? Now, Amelia said, looking around the gallery that was somehow impossibly hers, we figure out how to make this work. The real way this time. I like the sound of that, Jackson said. But first, I think I owe your mother a proper introduction as your actual boyfriend this time. Amelia laughed, the sound filling the gallery like music. She's going to love you. Especially when she finds out you're the one who made sure she got the best medical care. And your friend Sophie, the one who thinks she knows everything about your love life. She's going to say, I told you so about 100 times. I can live with that, Jackson said, pulling her close again. As long as I get to live with you. 6 months later, Jackson stood in that same gallery, filled with Amelia's students' artwork and bustling with visitors for the opening night of their spring exhibition. Amelia moved through the crowd, explaining each piece with passion and pride, her face glowing with happiness. Marcus approached his son, 2 glasses of wine in hand. She's remarkable, he said, watching Amelia encourage a shy student who was presenting her first public artwork. She is, Jackson agreed, accepting the wine, but not taking his eyes off Amelia. Your mother would have adored her, Marcus continued. She always said the right woman for you would be someone who challenged you to be better, not someone who made life easier. Mom was smart like that, Jackson said softly. She would have been proud of the man you've become. Not because of your success in business, but because you learned how to open your heart. Jackson was about to respond when he felt familiar arms wrap around his waist from behind. Amelia leaned against his back, and he could feel her contentment. In the way she relaxed against him. How's the show going? He asked, covering her hands with his. Beyond my wildest dreams, Amelia said. 3 pieces have already sold, and Mrs. Patterson from the school board is talking about expanding the art program. That's wonderful, Marcus said. You must be very proud. I am, Amelia said, then looked up at Jackson. Of my students. Of this gallery? Of what we've built together? Jackson turned in her arms, looking down at the woman who had changed his entire world. Speaking of what we've built together, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. Amelia's eyes widened as he pulled out a small velvet box. Jackson, what are you, Amelia Chen? Jackson said, dropping to one knee right there in the middle of the gallery, surrounded by art and students and the community they had built together. Will you marry me? For real this time? The gallery fell silent as everyone turned to watch. Amelia looked down at Jackson, her eyes filling with tears of joy. Are you sure? She asked, her voice barely audible. No contracts, no arrangements, just us? Just us? Jackson confirmed. Forever, if you'll have me. Yes, Amelia said, laughing through her tears. Yes, of course, yes. As Jackson slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, the gallery erupted in cheers and applause. But for Jackson and Amelia, the rest of the world faded away. There was only this moment, this love that had started as pretend and become the most real thing either of them had ever known. Later that evening, as they sat on the roof of Jackson's penthouse, looking out over the city lights, Amelia curled up against his side. Do you ever think about how different things might have been if I hadn't spilled that coffee? She asked. Jackson tightened his arms around her. Every day. And every day I'm grateful for that moment. It brought me you. Even though I ruined your expensive shirt, especially because you ruined my expensive shirt, Jackson said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Best $50 shirt I ever lost? Amelia tilted her head back to look at him. It was a $500 shirt. Was it? I honestly didn't care about the cost. I just knew I never wanted to let you walk away. Good thing, Amelia said, settling back against him, because I'm never walking away again. As they sat there together, planning their future and dreaming their dreams, neither of them could have imagined that what started as a desperate arrangement would become the greatest love story of their lives. But sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes spilling coffee on a stranger is exactly the beginning you never knew you needed. Their fake relationship had become beautifully, perfectly, eternally real. The end.